Okay, so this is a story and a thought that no one's really thought about. And I'm pretty shocked in the NBA landscape. We've seen pretty much with this season, this has been a season of pretty much with buyouts. I don't think ever in NBA history we've seen such good veteran players that have been multiple time All-Stars in the past. It's where they've been pretty much on expiring contracts. Very legitimate players in this day and age that make huge impacts for any contender. And we have an abundance amount that have been bought out this season, and there could be a couple more players to be bought out to be coming in the next couple of weeks. So we did see with Boogie Cousins, with the Houston Rockets, he was bought out earlier this season. We've seen with LaMarcus Aldridge go to the Brooklyn Nets. We've seen with Blake Griffin go over to the Brooklyn Nets as well. And then so on and so forth. There's just been kind of little ones sprinkling up in the air. But another big name that could be potentially bought out as his contract's going to be expiring is no other than DeMar DeRozan of the San Antonio Spurs. He is on an expiring contract. I was shocked that the Spurs did not rebuild at the beginning of the season. They kept LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan. They were sitting at a 5th seed through the 7th seed throughout most of the Western Conference for a couple of weeks. And some people, giving some good respect to the Spurs. I really could care less because I knew the Spurs, even if they were going to make the playoffs, which I didn't expect them to. I knew they were going to fold and go down in the standings. But I always knew that if they're going to get bounced in the first round, and it's going to be a wasted year because Aldridge and DeRozan were going to leave in free agency. The Spurs right now are sitting at an 8th seed in the Western Conference. At a 23-21 record, that's a really good record. And if you're in the Eastern Conference with that record, pretty much you're sitting at a 4th seed. So the Western Conference is stacked as it is. The Spurs need to rebuild their young cats, and that's what they've been kind of realizing. I'm very shocked that they didn't make any trades for LaMarcus Aldridge in the offseason, and they waited to the last minute, resulting into a buyout. So wasted opportunity for the San Antonio Spurs. Aldridge signed with the Brooklyn Nets, and we've seen that huge super team over there in New York. Now, focus on here is going to be DeMar DeRozan. He is still currently on the roster for the San Antonio Spurs. This is looking to be his 3rd season, and it's long overdue. LaMarcus Aldridge was way long overdue with the Spurs, but DeMar DeRozan is long overdue with the Spurs. He needs to leave and get out. And with the Spurs pretty much dipping in the standings from the 5th seed to the 7th, now to the 8th, you do have the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies knocking on the door for the Spurs. And with LaMarcus Aldridge out, you can tell the Spurs' direction and demeanor in the locker room that they know they're pretty much going to have to rebuild in this stage. So this is the point of the last month or two in the season to where the Spurs record's going to go down with. They're not going to make the playoffs. And this is also going to result into a potential buyout for DeMar DeRozan. I mean, just kind of think about that. DeMar DeRozan, who's a borderline all-star player in this day and age in the NBA, could potentially be bought out and shake up the whole NBA landscape as we've seen with these other teams so. Quick recap. DeMar DeRozan's been in the league for a couple seasons for now. I mean, you're looking at around his 12th season or so. He's usually been playing with the Toronto Raptors. His 3rd season with the San Antonio Spurs. And throughout his career, he's always been a shooting guard. Last season, they did move him to a small forward. And then now, surprisingly, this season with the small ball, DeMar DeRozan, who's 6'6", is playing power forward, who's been starting with the San Antonio Spurs, giving you 20.5 points a night, 7 assists, and pretty consistent. He was a borderline all-star. I mean, some people were shocked that Mike Conley got the nod over DeMar DeRozan, but is what it is. We're going to look at the potential teams that DeMar DeRozan, if he potentially gets bought out, and I believe that's going to be a great chance because I do expect the San Antonio Spurs to dip in the standings and pretty much to where the Spurs would pretty much just buy him out. This is something you got to keep your eye on, and no one's really talking about. So let's look at the potential teams for DeMar DeRozan. Now, of course, he's going to be bought out, so he's going to have to sign a veteran's minimum contract for 1 year, so for the rest of the season. So these players always join contenders, pretty much a given. And not only just contenders, but championship contenders. So we're pretty much only going to look at 3 to 4 legitimate teams for DeMar DeRozan based on a championship contending team, based on where they're at the standings, and then if he can be a starter and the role that will be given to him. So first, let's look into the Eastern Conference of the NBA. If we're looking into the East and for championships, contending type teams. The top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference are pretty much a given to be fighting to get out of the East. Now, you do have the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat that are at a 7th and 8th seed that are still contenders, but they've had a terrible start to the season. So let's jump in first. If we're looking into the Brooklyn Nets, that's not ideal. That's not going to happen. They have enough all-stars with James Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant as it is. DeMar DeRozan wouldn't even start, and he wouldn't get the touches. He's not going to denigrate himself to that, so he's not going to join the Brooklyn Nets, plus he would get backlash. It's not going to be a good look. He understands that. So the Brooklyn Nets we can cross off. Next, the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this is an interesting one to say the least if we're looking to Philadelphia. The furthest Philadelphia has been with the Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons experiment is whenever they brought in, of course, Tobias Harris as well, but Jimmy Butler for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They went to Game 7 against the Toronto Raptors in the second round of the NBA playoffs. And there was a good chance to where they could have potentially, if they would have won that series, they could have potentially won that championship against a hobbled Golden State Warriors and to go against the Milwaukee Bucks in the conference finals. But Philadelphia could really use a playmaker, someone who can score mid-range and go ISO basketball, an all-star pedigree type star in this league. So they could use him at the services at the 3. And this would be a good move if you're Philadelphia, especially for DeMar DeRozan, because if you're looking at 2 teams coming out of the Eastern Conference, it's either going to be Brooklyn or Philadelphia. Milwaukee's been up in the air. No one's really buying into them. The Miami Heat bringing Victor Oladipo, we got to see how that works out, but Miami's not going back into the NBA Finals. Not on my end. And the Boston Celtics, no. So Philadelphia makes a lot of sense for them. You could be seeing a starting lineup of Ben Simmons at the 1. At the 2, they'll probably have Danny Green. At your 3, you can have DeMar DeRozan. At your 4, Tobias Harris. And Joel Embiid at the 5. And then you can have Curry coming off the bench with George Hill and then some of these other players as well. That would be a scary starting 5 if you're Philadelphia. That team would have a lot of length. They would have a lot of height. The shortest guy would be 6'5" with Danny Green, who's a shooting guard. So Philadelphia would be a great piece if you're DeMar DeRozan trying to go for a championship. Now, is Philadelphia a big team to be a favorite? Favorite? No. They're probably number 3 or so. Number 3 or number 4. But it would be a good piece for him, for Philadelphia, let alone for the services they can acquire for him. Because Ben Simmons he's not an ISO scorer. He can't score in the clutch. And Joel Embiid's going to need another playmaker out there. Now, Tobias Harris has been picking up this season, but DeMar DeRozan would be very elite and very smooth on that side of things. So Philadelphia would be number 1 in the Eastern Conference. Number 2 in the Eastern Conference for DeMar DeRozan to pretty much make a decision to join. Again, we said not the Brooklyn Nets. I would actually put, in this situation, the Miami Heat. Now, with Miami, it's an interesting situation. They have an abundance amount of wings. So, since DeMar DeRozan has been playing the 4 this season, we could see DeMar DeRozan start at the 4. Or, if anything, come off the bench to be a 6-man. But we're most likely going to see DeMar DeRozan, if he were to join. Pretty much we can see a starting lineup of, it kind of depends, Goran Dragic or Kendrick Nunn at the 1. But due to, Goran Dragic balling out in the playoffs and the finals. So I'll put Goran Dragic at the 1. At the 2, you can go with Duncan Robinson. At your 3, Jimmy Butler. At your 4, you're going to have DeMar DeRozan. At the 5, Bam Adebayo. It really depends. The Heat can go very small, and they like to switch things up. But DeMar DeRozan will be a huge piece if he were to join the Miami Heat, requiring his playoff experience, and let alone his scoring ability to help out Jimmy Butler, especially in the clutch, if they're going deeper into the finals or in the playoffs. And preferably, it's Miami. Come on now. He would like to join the Miami Heat, I would expect. So we do have Philadelphia. You do have the Miami Heat. For the Boston Celtics, he's not going to join them because the Celtics are a mess as it is. And come on, it's Boston. It's not appealing. Lastly in the East, he could consider is the Milwaukee Bucks, of course. They could really use the services of having a deeper depth on their team, let alone they need another scorer out there, another star with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are elite. We all know this, but if you can slide DeMar DeRozan into that lineup, That'd be huge for them. You could see a starting lineup of Drew Holiday at the 1, Chris Middleton at the 2, DeMar DeRozan at the 3, Giannis at the 4, then Brook Lopez at the 5. Especially late in the playoffs, Giannis is not clutch. He cannot get it done. Now, they did bring Drew Holiday for that reason, to help out, but adding in DeMar DeRozan as well would be elite and electric for them. But again, if you're looking at the East, if you're DeMar, you either got the 76ers, the Heat, or the Bucks, and Milwaukee's not an appealing place to go. So most likely, if it comes to this scenario of the team, let alone the destination, we could potentially see the Miami Heat in that situation. But he would really gel with those vets, Pat Riley and the crew. That probably makes the most sense for his perspective, knowing DeMar DeRozan. So that's on the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, for the contending teams, there's a lot of contending teams in the West. I doubt he would join the Utah Jazz for 1 year, even though they're number 1 in the Western Conference. But with DeMar DeRozan, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The Phoenix Suns are intriguing, but he's not going to join the Phoenix Suns. Now, preferably, since he was raised in California and LA, we're looking at either the Clippers or the Lakers. And the Clippers have an abundance amount of wings with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So if you're DeMar DeRozan, I would say the LA Lakers are the most appealing team. They are favorites to come out of the Western Conference, bringing in Andre Drummond. LeBron can run back to the point guard position. You can put Shooter as a 6-man. You can have KCP at the 2. You can throw DeMar DeRozan at the 3, AD at the 4, and Andre Drummond at the 5. This team would be electric going against the Brooklyn Nets in the NBA Finals. And LeBron James is cool letting DeMar DeRozan do his thing. That's the most attractive destination if you're looking to the Western Conference. If you're looking at other teams in the West, I mean, you got the Portland Trail Blazers, of course, would be huge for DeMar DeRozan, but he's not going to join them. They'll be out in the first or second round if he were to join. And there's no one else in the West, really. So overall, you're looking at 4 teams in the aspect of the NBA. You're looking at the 76ers, the Heat, the Bucks, and the Lakers. If he were to make a decision out of any of these teams, I would say it'd either be the Miami Heat or the LA Lakers. Now, when it comes to winning a championship, which he wants to do, I would say he would actually join the LA Lakers out of all this. That's my thoughts on things like that. Let me know what you guys think below. What makes sense on your side. Cover more.